What we're going to try and look at now is... Oh, face that way, that's probably a good idea. All over there, so I'll face that way. Oh, the hat. Oh, the hat.
Oh, yeah, nice. Very nice.
So we're going to be looking at medieval fighting techniques. Now you can see our two combatants here in full plate armour. What we're going to try and show you is the contrast of what you may have seen in some films. I think Ridley Scott's got a lot to answer for. Is he local? No. So you may have seen films or video games where... Can I borrow for a second? You get one guy and the other one just going bang, 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 until one or the other of them gets tired or dead. Which, contrary to popular belief, is not an infection you can get or build up. So, is that true? Is it true? Is that what happens? Is that what the medieval types did?
No, I don't think
Thank you. No, little girl at the back. No, that isn't what they did. Because they, as you, are not stupid. Believe it or not. If you can think of it being a bad idea, they can probably think it was a bad idea as well. So what we're going to try and show you is a much more complex weapons system. Not just an individual weapon used in isolation from all other weapons. This is a system. So in much the same way that the military nowadays has a range of weapons that they will use for certain situations and in certain ways, the same is true of the medieval weapons. A certain weapon has a certain use, but then techniques from one can be applied to another. Now, as a student of fighting, a nobleman, a knight, we're going to start our training possibly with the longest weapon, maybe a spear, but then we're going to move on to one of these, much more useful. This is a poleaxe. Not a pole axe, even though it is on a pole. Pole is the Old English word for your head. Andreas, if you could indicate the head on the opponent there. Right about there. That's the head. That's the end of the biology lesson. Head. Okay? Now, although that is your opponent's head, it does actually refer to the head of the weapon. So that blow to the head was completely useless. But thank you. Well suffered. Pointless task. It's pointless me illustrating that because it's nothing to do with it. So, moving on. Head all right. The head is actually the head of the axe. Now, this weapon has a multifaceted head. That head, if you hold it out in front of you, illustrate, chap, it looks very scary, but that's the heavy bit. If you've ever held out a broom, it's easy. All right, back. That's an illustration of how heavy it is. See? Now, pretty good. Oh, it's the altitude over here, isn't it? It's no air.
That was fun.
So, this weapon held like this, yeah, it's not too bad for a while, but if you start to get tired, in the same way that if you hold a broom by the handle and have the brush end a long way out at arm's length, that's heavy. Why not hold the brush end and hold that bit close to you and it's not heavy anymore? But it's the same object. So by holding it with the scary looking bit forward, that's heavy, you get tired quickly, and it's slower because it's heavy, and therefore it's harder to aim with any accuracy if you hold it out in front. So perhaps it's better to hold the weapon the other way around. Now this end is called the cue. Sometimes the cue has a spike on the end of it, these ones don't, these are for training. So that is the cue end. If anybody plays pool or snooker, you may be familiar with the term already. Not over the top of the finger in this instance, but a very good weapon. Now this, obviously, is much, much lighter. Therefore, it's faster and more accurate. So most of our work with the poleaxe isn't going to be done with a scary looking end, but with the boring looking end. That's by far the more useful bit. And it can be used to attack and to parry and defend. So gentlemen, a bit of parrying, attacking and defending. You can see them probing to attack, but also using the weapon to parry their opponent's blows, trying to defend themselves. Now, be nice, come on, be nice. Wants to set you at different ends of the class. Now, this weapon used in this way, as you can see, is very good for getting those probing attacks in to try and find a weakness. But against plate steel, it's not really going to do that much. You can be battering away at it for days at a time. Ding, ding, ding. Oh no. Not until he does starvation, is it really going to have that much effect? Could happen. It's been a long day already, hasn't it? So it's really not going to do much. But one thing you can do with the cube that you can't do with the other end very readily is to bind your opponent, to get him into locks. So if you see a chink, a gap through your opponent's arm, you may be able to get the cue in there and use it to lock off your opponent. So that certainly has compromised. And because he has gauntlets on and he's holding a pollaxe, could you let go of that weapon? Even though you really wanted to. Couldn't let go of it, so it's jammed him up. He's trapped. His own hand is trapped against his weapon, and if he lets go of it, he's going to get a bit killed. That's often bad, so he's going to avoid that. So, the weapon can be used to get in, trapping around the arm, but it can also be used against the legs as well, so we can use a similar technique to trap in around his legs. There we go. Just pick up his leg and walk him wherever he wants. If he manages to get around the back and put the weapon in through that away, and then lean, you can imagine it's all sorts of... No, don't worry, don't do that. All right, it's a family show. That can also create an awful lot of problems. It can unbalance your opponent once he's on the floor, or he's compromised. That's when the scary end of it comes more into play. So the cue is very good for those probing attacks, defending yourself against your opponent, waiting for that gap. By using it in much the same way that you would think of using an axe for cutting wood or a sledgehammer for breaking up concrete, once you've got that little probing attack, whack! That's when it comes into action. If it's out the front already, whack! Tickle him, make him a bit nervous. But by having it at the back, you can deliver so much more power when you need it. So, now we're going to reverse the weapon and bring the scary end forward. The first bit of the weapon we can see is the pointy bit on the end, as it is technically known. The dag, this bit here, looks a bit like a spear. Now because it's accompanied with these two things, it gets a little bit heavy. So we can use it in a thrusting manner, in the same way that we'd use the cue. But now we have a spike on this, we're going to use it not against the plate steel, as we saw earlier. Bing, 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 bing. We might get through, but why bother? Why bother when there's a big gap there? Oh! So now we're going to show the targets one may aim for with the pointy spike, which may be up under the arm. Into the elbow, maybe even to the wrists. If you can see them, you can get in there. Oh, that was good. There is a target around the front, I forget the name of it. And if he gets around the back, that's the one. If he gets around the back, there's all sorts of fantastic targets one might be aiming for. There was a gentleman by the name of Vlad who had a lot of fun with this sort of technique. If we manage to get in the backs of his knees, that's the game over here. So that dag is extremely useful. Obviously, the face with the visor up is a very, very good target. Now, if you want to know more about the armour, hopefully you saw Dr. Capwell talking about it earlier, you know all about it. Maybe you didn't. So, that dag is very useful for the thrust, but don't aim for the metal, aim where the metal isn't. It may be possible to get a dag like this through plate steel, but if you have a flat piece of steel and you manage to hit absolutely at 90 degrees with sufficient force, you may have enough power to punch through that steel. But if you take that same piece of steel and take it off only about 10 degrees, the odds of you getting that purchase are very small, and it's more likely to skate off the surface. So all of these rounded surfaces are designed to guide those attacks with the weapon away from the vulnerable areas which we just saw. So it's quite tricky. This is why armour is a compromise between protection and mobility. And with the visor up, they're quite able to see and breathe. But with the visors down, gentlemen, if you could oblige me, their vision is much, much reduced, which also therefore means they can't, even if they can get exactly the same amount of air, it feels more claustrophobic, it feels like you can't breathe, and you get hotter. But we do still have the targets here and here. But of course the armour is designed specifically, so it's very difficult to get anything in there without it skating over the surface. It's all going to be guided away from the vulnerable areas. That's what the armour's for. Okay, nice. There are another two facets to this weapon. excluding the heart. But we have, it's your favourite, Andreas, it's your favourite bit. Guess which bit? Yes, the hammer, which is made extra hurty by having lots of points on it. The reason for it having this multifaceted head is partly because it's more hurty. Sure, that's right. Looks a lot like a meat tenderizer, you were saying earlier, weren't you? Yes. Anybody know why it looks like a meat tenderizer? Because it is one. That's exactly why. Because it's for tenderizing meat. Happens to be inside the armour at the moment. But another reason is by having these multifaceted surfaces, it fits more readily to the curves of the armour. It's more likely to gain purchase on those deflective surfaces. Also, by having those multifacets, if you have a flat carpenter's hammer, then you have one flat surface landing on another flat curved surface, and it skates off. By using these little points, it's more likely to convey the energy of the weapon through the armour to the occupant of the armour. That's you guys.